12. Nicole and Walter. While working as a nanny for a Florida family in 2020, 27-year-old Nicole and Walter allegedly sold explicit videos of herself online that she'd filmed at her workplace in Pensacola. An investigation was launched after members of law enforcement uncovered the highly inappropriate footage and speculated that Walter was profiting off the fact that she was recording the clips in a place where she shouldn't have been. At least one person told the police that Walter charged extra to film videos at her employer's home, to the tune of at least $8 per minute. She also recorded herself doing unmentionable things in various public places in the Florida Panhandle, including a car dealership and a doctor's office. Following the investigation, authorities charged Walter with human trafficking and several other crimes, including lewd and lascivious conduct. She ended up pleading guilty to reduced charges and was sentenced to 6 months in jail, followed by 4 years of probation. Also, in exchange for her guilty plea, the most serious charges against Walter were dropped. She's no longer allowed to work as a nanny and has since lost her license as a foster parent. 11. Masha Duok. Masha Duok, the so-called hot nanny hired by Jeff Lowe in the bizarre docuseries Tiger King, was arrested in 2022 when she allegedly got caught stealing a $5,000 candelabra from a Las Vegas hotel and nightclub. Security guards identified the 28-year-old based on surveillance footage and social media, and as a result she was charged with grand larceny. Lowe and his wife hired the nanny, who also works as a part-time model and waitress, in late 2019 to care for Lowe's grandchild. But at the time she got in trouble for stealing the fancy candle holder from the club's private dining room, it appeared as though she had left her position as a nanny. The charges were announced months after the theft allegedly occurred, but for now it's unclear where the case stands. 10. Sarah Katherine Seltzer. In August 2022, Charlotte Mecklenburg police arrested 33-year-old Sarah Katherine Seltzer for allegedly stealing prescription pills, valuables, and other items from families she worked for as a nanny. The investigation into Seltzer's suspected crimes began on Christmas Day in 2021, when the first report against her was made by one of her employers. Several other families complained to law enforcement over the ensuing months after they began to suspect the woman they knew as a cat of pilfering their belongings. The most recent report against Seltzer was just 3 days before her arrest. One local mum named Allison told local station WBTV that she liked how Kat's profile looked on a babysitting app, but she began to notice that her prescription pills were running low after she hired Seltzer to look after her young daughter in February 2022. At first, Allison assumed she was just being paranoid, but the problem apparently became undeniable after Kat returned for a second gig. Before leaving, Seltzer allegedly asked Allison if she could use the restroom, and when the hired caretaker left, Allison entered the bathroom and discovered that her pill bottle was completely empty. At that point, Allison realized that her pills weren't disappearing on their own, prompting her to file a police report and find another babysitter. According to WBTV, numerous other complaints describe similar thefts of prescription drugs, as well as thousands of dollars worth of designer bags and other merchandise going missing from people's homes, along with breaking and entering accusations against Seltzer. One woman even claimed to catch Seltzer in the act of breaking into her house shortly after she interviewed for a childcare position at the home. Speaking with the news outlet, Allison said that she had no ill will towards Seltzer, but that it was time for the young woman to get the help she needed and to face the consequences for her actions. The shocked mother also hoped that her experience would serve as a wake-up call to other parents about the importance of background checking prospective babysitters, no matter how trustworthy a candidate may seem. Allison also disagreed with the judge's decision to allow Seltzer out on bond, but the current status of the case is unclear. 9. Jennifer Palmer. While working as a live-in nanny in Hawaii during the late 1980s, 20-year-old Donna Jordan met and began dating 32-year-old Roger Harris, a highly respected career airman with the United States Air Force. The relationship moved fast, and the couple married less than a year after they got together. 3 years later, they had their first child, and another addition to the family soon followed. The Harrises moved around for a handful of years due to Roger's military career. and when he retired from the Air Force, the family settled down in Lake City, Florida, where Donna worked as a nurse while Roger stayed at home with their 2 kids. But he eventually became bored with domestic life and got a job. To meet their child care needs, the couple hired a young woman named Jennifer Palmer, first as a babysitter and then as a live-in nanny. By the time Jennifer moved in with the family in 1998, she and Roger were entangled in a full-blown affair. At first, Donna was completely unaware of the tryst, but she eventually found out and all hell broke loose. She ordered Jennifer to move out immediately, and the young woman complied with the order. But the affair with Roger continued, and Donna eventually realized that it wasn't going to stop. Roger promised to marry Jennifer, but at the same time he was afraid to divorce Donna because he feared losing access to their children. So he ultimately decided that the only way to pursue a future with Jennifer and remain close to his kids was by eliminating Donna from the picture altogether. A few months after the drama over the affair first erupted, Roger fired a homemade nail gun into the back of Donna's head. He then placed her dead body into her minivan, drove it to a rest stop, abandoned it in the parking lot, and reported his wife missing the next day. Police found Donna's decomposing remains 3 days later after someone noticed the overwhelming odor of death, and investigators were quick to narrow their focus on Roger and his mistress as their prime suspects. Under pressure from detectives, Jennifer eventually admitted that Roger had killed Donna and that she'd helped him by disposing of evidence and picking him up at the rest stop where he left Donna's minivan. Jennifer pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit first-degree murder and accessory after the fact, and she testified against Roger in exchange for a 20-year prison sentence. Roger was convicted of first-degree murder by a jury and received the death sentence, which was later commuted to life in prison without parole. 8. Adeline Jean Burkett and Marquand Edwards. 18-year-old Adeline Jean Burkett and 22-year-old Marquand Edwards were babysitting 2 kids in Bay County, Florida in June of 2023 when they allegedly decided to take the tots on an overnight cross-country joyride in their mother's vehicle. According to authorities, the suspects drove over 1,000 miles from Panama City to Milwaukee, Wisconsin. They were accused of ditching the kids in a public park after learning the police were on their trail. But the strategy failed, and the duo were taken into custody by U.S. Marshals less than 2 days after fleeing northwestern Florida with the children in tow. Even more importantly, the children were found unharmed. While the Marshals dealt with Burkett and Edwards, the local police cared for the little ones, who were reunited with their family the following day. The kids' grandmother, Tina Leach, told local station WISN 12 that the family immediately hit the road when they learned that the children had been found, and that they drove nearly non-stop for 17 hours to get to Milwaukee. The length of the drive was not even a slight problem, according to Leach, who said, "We would have walked if we had to." The mother of the kids told deputies in Bay County, Florida, that Burkett was a trusted babysitter and family friend who they would have never suspected of doing something like this. To deepen the already complicated situation, Burkett herself had been reported as a missing child out of Marathon County, Wisconsin, more than 3 years earlier in 2020. According to law enforcement, she was considered a runaway when she disappeared from the town of Mosinee and was believed to be purposefully avoiding the police despite being considered an endangered person. Before the incident involving the stolen kids and car, the last known sighting of the young woman was in November 2021 in Milwaukee. 7. Laura Templeton. In December 2019, a St. Charles County, Missouri woman named Laura Templeton was accused of stealing from a family she worked for as a babysitter, leading investigators to believe that the 48-year-old had likely victimized more than one household. According to police, the investigation was launched after a local mother filed a complaint claiming that Templeton had stolen her credit cards. The victim told detectives that she'd hired the suspect using a childcare app, only to discover that her wallet had vanished. About a half hour after the mum arrived home and sent Templeton on her way, the suspect allegedly used the victim's credit card to make the first of multiple purchases. Police accused Templeton of making at least 6 purchases, including Christmas gifts, gas for her vehicle, and household items. Each of the purchases was reportedly caught on surveillance footage, making it easy for investigators to identify the suspect without entertaining the possibility that the victim's wallet had somehow fallen into another person's hands. Templeton was charged with 5 counts of felony theft and 2 misdemeanor counts of fraudulent credit card use. Throughout the investigation, police discovered that the suspect had offered childcare services through several apps and using several different social media accounts, indicating that there may have been other victims. A St. Charles County police spokesperson reminded the public that it's important for parents to do their due diligence and research the person they're hiring to look after their little ones. To ensure a candidate's trustworthy, the spokesperson recommended checking references, conducting a background check, and making a surprise visit during the babysitting gig to see how the hired caretaker is interacting with the child. 6. Mindy Man. Nobody knew who Mindy Man was during the 3 years she spent as the nanny for Gwen Stefani and Gavin Rossdale's 3 children. She became famous, or perhaps infamous, overnight in 2015, shortly after news of Stefani and Rossdale's impending divorce surfaced. According to news sources, Man and Rossdale had a 3-year-long affair, and the Australian worker was being blamed for ruining her employer's 13-year marriage. According to Us Weekly, the affair was outed after another one of the couple's employees discovered illicit photos and racy text messages that were exchanged between Rossdale and Man. Rossdale allegedly dismissed the correspondence as harmless flirtation at first, but he reportedly confessed to the affair months after the suspicions arose. But neither Stefani nor Rossdale ever commented publicly on the infidelity. Of course, an affair requires 2 willing parties, and Rossdale was every bit as responsible for it as Man was. But Man was demonized in a much worse fashion than her paramour, and the widespread criticism grew even more when she revealed in 2016 that she was pregnant. By then, Man was no longer seeing Rossdale and had moved on to a new relationship with a snowboarding instructor named Spencer Gutchin. But she initially declined to reveal the identity of the unborn child's father when questioned by reporters, leading to speculations that the child may have been Rossdale's. Eventually, though, she confirmed that Gutchin was the father, snuffing out the long-standing rumors, and has remained largely out of the spotlight since then. 5. Joseline Stewart. In August 2019, a Tennessee family hired 27-year-old Joseline Stewart to babysit at their home in Hendersonville. But immediately upon arriving home, the household matriarch noticed several $1,000s worth of her jewelry was missing and called the police. Detective Frank Scalise later told Fox 17 that Stewart initially denied having any of the stolen items in her possession, but she quickly handed the jewelry over when he and other members of the police department arrived at the scene and pressured her to tell the truth. Stewart reportedly gave up even more pieces of jewelry when police questioned her about any items that might be in her vehicle and told the young woman that they planned to search it. According to Scalise, law enforcement recovered more than $35,000 worth of jewelry and cash from Stewart. He said that they also collected items that they suspected were stolen but had no way to prove it, so they entered the property into evidence and put an alert out for any other potential victims to come forward with a description of their stolen belongings. Unlike some of the victims on today's list, the family who hired Stewart didn't find her using a childcare app. They hired her to fill in for their regular sitter, who was unavailable that day, and said that she was the sister-in-law of their normal employee, who recommended Stewart as her replacement for that shift. Stewart reportedly worked as a babysitter for several other families in the area, furthering investigators' suspicions that there were other victims involved. The family was lucky to get their belongings back, but they also had themselves to thank for it. According to Scalise, their decision to act immediately and call the police contributed to the successful recovery of their property. 4. Stephanie Santoro. The split between Kate and John Gosselin on the John and Kate Plus 8 reality series has been one of the most highly publicized divorces in recent decades. News of the separation came in 2009 during the series' 5th season, when the parents of sextuplets and one set of twins announced that they were going their separate ways. Of course, it wouldn't have been a newsworthy split if it weren't rife with rumors and allegations of infidelity. Kate accused John of cheating on her and claimed that John turned into a different person overnight, which caught her off guard after years of believing that her husband was in it for the long haul. Meanwhile, John described the marriage as non-affectionate and resembling a business transaction rather than a meaningful relationship. He adamantly denied Kate's cheating allegations and was quick to get into a new relationship with a 22-year-old woman named Haley Glassman. Months after news of the Joselyn separation broke, the gossip about John's wild personal life continued to proliferate. John insisted that he was being loyal to Glassman, but in November 2009, his former nanny, Stephanie Santoro, came forward with allegations that she had a steamy affair with her employer during the month she spent working for him. During an interview with In Touch magazine, Santoro claimed that she'd befriended John several years earlier while working at a bar. She said that John began coming into the bar more often after he and Kate separated, and their friendship eventually became close enough to where they were talking on the phone. Their first encounter happened before Santoro was employed as John's nanny, and it reportedly happened 8 more times throughout the following weeks. The romantic aspect of the relationship was reportedly very good, with Santoro giving it a 9 out of 10 rating. She had fewer positive things to say about the physical intimacy, saying that it wasn't terrible, but it wasn't the best she'd ever had. Santoro further claimed that while she and John did not discuss marriage, they did talk about the prospect of pursuing a long-term relationship together. And to further clarify things, she stated plainly that John had cheated on Glassman, claiming that she wasn't fully aware of the status of John's relationship with Glassman during her encounters with him. Regardless of what did or didn't happen between John and Santoro, he said that he lost everything in his divorce with Kate. During a 2016 interview with The Steve Harvey Show, he claimed that the TLC network tried keeping him and Kate together for the sake of continuing the show, but that he eventually reached a point where he couldn't play along anymore. In John's words, he took a moral versus a business stance, and he lost all of his money for it. 3. The Sienna Miller and Jude Law scandal. British-American actress Sienna Miller was just 23 years old when the UK Sun published a rumor in 2005 that she was pregnant by her then-fiancé and co-star Jude Law. It was true. Miller was less than 12 weeks along, and she was not ready for the world to know about the pregnancy. The stress of having everyone find out at a bad time took an enormous toll on her mental health. Miller didn't end up having the baby. She would later accuse The Sun of forcing her to make decisions about her own body that she still struggles to live with to this day. The young starlet hadn't even confided in her family about the pregnancy before the information was put out there for anyone and everyone to know. She'd only told 3 of her closest friends and was still deciding how and when to appropriately address the matter with everyone else in her life. And to make the situation even more stressful, the pregnancy leak came right at the same time that Jude Law admitted to having an affair behind Sienna's back with his children's nanny, Daisy Wright. Reporters managed to get their hands on passages from the nanny's diary, and excerpts were published for the whole world to see. Before dating Miller, Law married and had children with a woman named Sadie. The couple split in 2003, but they remained in contact for the sake of co-parenting their children. They hired Wright to take care of their kids in 2004, the same year Law got engaged to Miller. Miller and Law split due to the drama surrounding the affair and Miller's pregnancy, and Law publicly apologized to everyone who was personally affected by his cheating. The two continued to see one another on and off until 2011, when they decided to end things for good. But even though the relationship was over, the damage was lasting. During an interview with The Guardian in 2022, Miller described how stressful it was to be in the public eye at a time when she was heartbroken and being mocked and ridiculed. Now, in her early 40s, she eventually reached a settlement with The Sun for an undisclosed amount of money over the pregnancy leak, which she believed resulted from a reporter illegally accessing her health records by pretending to be one of her representatives. Miller said that she was first tipped off to the possibility after her doctor called her and told her they sent her records along to an employee of hers who'd requested them, only for her to clarify that nobody who worked for her had asked for her medical information. Upon accepting the settlement, Miller said that she would have preferred to go to trial, but that doing so would have been too expensive. But the matter is now officially closed, finally leaving her in a place to truly move on with her life. 2. Claire Houseman. There are always 2 or more sides to a story, especially when it comes to allegations of an extramarital affair. Rolling Stones frontman Mick Jagger has always adamantly denied cheating on his ex-partner model Jerry Hall, but the former nanny to his children, Claire Houseman, told a much different story during a tell-all interview with the UK Mirror in 2002. Jagger's personal life over the last 6 decades has been complicated, to say the least. He's been married and divorced at least once and has 8 children with 5 different women. His relationship with Jerry Hall lasted from 1977 to 1999, overlapping the tail end of his marriage to Bianca Perez Mora Macias, which ended in 1978. During the 2002 Mirror interview, Houseman, the nanny, claimed that Jagger seduced her within 2 days of meeting for the first time. She also accused Jagger of putting the moves on her on at least one occasion when Jerry Hall was sitting in the next room. Houseman described seeing Jagger shamelessly exit his shower buck naked and extend his hand out while introducing himself. She said that the singer didn't seem the least bit modest or embarrassed, and that Jerry was close enough to see that Jagger was greeting her naked but didn't say or do anything about it. According to Houseman, Jagger and Hall were sleeping in separate bedrooms at the time, indicating that the couple had a less than conventional living arrangement. The actual encounter between Jagger and Houseman allegedly occurred in Jagger's kitchen, which was apparently so small that he and the nanny couldn't stop bumping into each other. The former nanny seemed remorseful for the alleged tryst with the famous singer. She told the Mirror that she couldn't help herself and that she wanted to apologize to Jerry Hall for her role in the situation. At the same time, though, Houseman pointed the finger at Jagger as the main culprit in the infidelity, citing his extensive and proven history as a womanizer, and stating, "I don't think Hall can really blame me." And now for number 1. But if you want to hear more bizarre and crazy stories, stay tuned after the video for some more content. 1. Masha Williams. Before she was a film producer and philanthropist, Masha Williams was the nanny to beloved American actor Robin Williams' son Zachary. She started working for Robin in 1984, and at some point, she began a romantic relationship with the actor. Masha became pregnant in late 1988, the same year that Robin and his first wife Valerie split. Valerie Williams claimed that the relationship between Masha and Robin began after she and Robin separated, but the timing was close enough for many to wonder if that's really true. Either way, there was no denying that Robin was a serial cheater. In the documentary about Robin Williams, titled Come Inside My Mind, his first wife Valerie revealed that Robin had numerous affairs, stating, "He loved women, absolutely loved women, and I got it. I understood and I wanted him to have that, but I also wanted him to come home." It's arguably a more understanding and perhaps realistic perspective than many wives would take upon discovering that their husband was cheating, but it's also why Robin and Valerie went their separate ways in the end. Robin and Masha married in 1989 and had 2 children together. During the marriage, Masha worked as Robin's personal assistant on several of his movie sets, and eventually she became the producer of several of his films. For decades, the couple seemed happy together, which was why many people were surprised when they split in 2008 after 19 years of marriage. According to news reports, Masha filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences. Close friends reportedly told the press that the relationship had been under immense strain ever since Robin relapsed into his alcohol habit 2 years earlier, in 2006, after 2 decades of sobriety. Robin went to rehab and managed to stay sober, and he credited Masha with helping him stay clean. But when he fell off the wagon, he broke Masha's trust in ways that apparently were impossible for the couple to overcome. One source told People magazine that the marriage was long over before the divorce proceedings began on paper, and that Robin and Masha had essentially been living separate lives. Despite the heartbreak, the split was amicable, and it seemed like the two still very much loved one another, even if they couldn't make their marriage work. 12. Tangi Coleman. In 2008, the family of a Michigan man in his 80s named Frank Calcaterra hired a home care company to take care of Frank's wife Johnny, who suffered from dementia. The company then sent a home health aide worker in her 30s named Tangi Coleman to help Johnny. At the time, she had a warrant out for her arrest, but the Calcaterras and her employer were apparently unaware of this. Court documents would later claim that Johnny's jewelry began to disappear almost immediately, along with the small fortune Frank had amassed through years of hard work. When all was said and done, estimates would put the losses at somewhere between $500,000 and $1.5 million. According to the Detroit Free Press, by the time Johnny passed away in a nursing home in early 2012, Coleman and her mother were living in the Calcaterras' lakefront residence, and Frank had started sleeping in the basement. Several months later, Frank, who was 86 years old at the time, married Coleman in Ohio without his family knowing about it. Coleman was 35 and had finalized her divorce from a previous husband 2 weeks before her marriage to Frank. The senior citizen later said that Coleman told him he needed to marry her because she was waiting for a lawsuit settlement, but couldn't be paid until she had someone to help her oversee the money due to her poor financial decisions. However, journalists from the Detroit Free Press failed to find any record of such a lawsuit ever existing. By the time Coleman and Frank married, at least 2 complaints detailing suspected financial exploitation had been filed with Adult Protective Services. A caseworker noted that Frank said he was aware of the allegations against Coleman and that it acknowledged giving her access to his finances. He seemed aware of the situation but denied that he was being financially exploited. Investigators visited a few more times, but Frank continued to send them away. Frank's adult children remained convinced that their father was being taken advantage of. They faced further roadblocks as they continued trying to get authorities to investigate the case. Because he and Coleman were married, the family was often told that it was a civil matter rather than criminal. In the absence of a criminal case, they took law enforcement's advice and filed a civil lawsuit. The family also took measures to protect Frank and any income that he'd receive in the future, since all of his money was completely gone. They then removed Frank from his home and a court-appointed conservator took over his finances. Coleman denied exploiting her husband and accused his family of abducting him. She was never criminally charged, but a judge annulled the marriage, ensuring that she had no legal claim to Frank's estate. 11. Joselyn Zacho. While living at the Crown Casino in Melbourne as a VIP member in 2018, 41-year-old Joselyn Zacho needed to devise a way to continue financing her gambling addiction. Over a 6-month period, starting in June of that year, she met at least 2 wealthy men on Tinder and swindled them out of nearly $800,000. One of the victims was a financial planner who handed over $61,000, believing he was investing in legitimate business projects. Zacho reeled another benefactor in by not only using her good looks and charm, but also by convincing him that she was an entrepreneur who owned blueberry and tobacco farms. In her efforts to persuade the man to invest in the business, she gave him a Rolex, which turned out to be a fake. Also swayed by her promise of a 300% return, the man initially wired Zacho $200,000. She pressured him for even more money, claiming that the farm was linked to illegal cigarettes and that his family would be in danger if he didn't pay. And at some point, Zacho began sending dozens of threatening emails to the people in his life, including his mother, ex-wife, and even his kids. Zacho ultimately received over $720,000 from the man, all of which she gambled away before the victim reported her to law enforcement. He told investigators that he drained his bank account and borrowed money from family and friends to meet Zacho's demands for cash. In cooperation with law enforcement, the man made plans to meet Zacho for dinner, at which point detectives descended on the scene and took her into custody. During police questioning, she acknowledged that she gained a lot of money and squandered it at the casino. She said she regretted the fact that she didn't make any wise investments and that she didn't even buy any assets with the funds. But Zacho denied using Tinder specifically as a hunting ground for rich men to take advantage of, and she expressed a blatant lack of remorse for her crimes. In fact, she even blamed the victim, who reported her for being stupid enough to believe her stories and give her money. The extortion that authorities actually know about reflects just a fraction of the $24 million Zacho gambled away over a 2-year period starting in 2016. She pleaded guilty to fraud, extortion, deception, and blackmail charges, and she was sentenced to 4 years and 8 months in prison. Zacho appealed her sentence though, arguing that it was excessive for the nature of her crimes and that the prosecution overemphasized and misrepresented her use of Tinder to allegedly find victims. Not surprisingly, the court rejected the appeal. According to the most recent update, Zacho has repaid at least a tenth of the money she owes to her victims. 10. Fatima Williams. While shopping at Costco in late 2010, an 89-year-old widower from Florida named Jack Adler met a woman in her early 40s named Fatima Williams. They soon began going on lunch dates and shopping trips several times a week at Adler's expense, and these outings typically involved stopping at a bank or ATM to withdraw money. Over an 11-week period, Adler withdrew more than $129,000. He took as much as $800 from the ATM during each visit and wrote checks for up to $60,000 at a time. According to court records, he suffered from an age-related cognitive disability, suggesting that he may not have been fully aware that he was being swindled by someone who likely had no interest in having a genuine relationship with him. Adler's son, Alan, told the South Florida Sun-Sentinel that his dad's mental decline wasn't really noticeable at first. He didn't show typical signs of dementia, like forgetfulness, but the disease affected his judgment. Alan was unaware of his dad's relationship with Williams until the elder Adler told him that he was no longer driving and that he relied on his girlfriend to take him places. During the conversation, he couldn't remember Williams' full name. Suspecting his father might have fallen victim to a scam artist, Alan and other family members looked into Adler's finances and realized right away that there was definitely a problem. At his son's urging, Adler called Williams while Alan listened in and asked her if she'd taken money from his bank account. Williams allegedly replied by asking if the bank had called Adler or if his family was asking him about his finances. Adler told Williams that his family had asked and that they were with him at that very moment. She then admitted to taking money from his bank account and said, "You told me I could take money out anytime I wanted, remember?" Long story short, the authorities got involved and Williams pleaded no contest to 1 count of elderly exploitation. She was sentenced to 2 years of probation and paid $60,000 back to Adler per the court's orders. Williams allegedly struck again 5 years later in 2016 when she was accused of exploiting another 89-year-old man in Boca Raton. The senior citizen, who had no family to speak of, was residing in a living-assisted facility at the time. But there were people looking out for him, including an administrator at his residence and a bank manager who called the state's abuse hotline. The allegations dated as far back as 2013, when a staff member at the facility accused Williams of trying to control who visited the man. She also allegedly wanted any mention of dementia wiped from his file and wanted to have other involvement in his care that made employees question her motives, especially as a non-relative. And in 2014, a bank employee became concerned because Williams was reportedly trying to add herself to the man's account. The banker was well acquainted with the man and found the situation highly questionable, given his history of being extremely watchful over his finances and his noticeable mental decline in recent years. At some point during a 3-year period, Williams became his power of attorney. The Broward County Sheriff's Office accused Williams of persuading the man to sign the agreement while knowing that he was unable to consent due to his condition. According to authorities, Williams obtained more than $385,000 worth of goods and cash, including a BMW. When she learned that the man's finances were under investigation, she allegedly got rid of the BMW and settled for a less conspicuous Hyundai. A warrant for Williams' arrest was issued in 2015, but she was hard to find. She wasn't put into handcuffs until the following year when her casino card alerted security that there was possibly a wanted person in the building. Williams' lawyer told the Sun-Sentinel that his client didn't exploit the alleged victim and that he was confident she'd be exonerated of the charges she faced, but the outcome of the case is unclear. 9. Patrick Giblin. Depending on which dating profile he was using at any given time, Patrick Giblin claimed he was either a state lottery commission employee or involved in the casino business. He placed himself at a beachfront home in New Jersey and said he had connections to cheap flights through his brother, who he claimed was a United States Airways executive. But anyone can say anything online, and according to federal investigators, none of what Giblin advertised about himself was true. In addition to deceiving women into thinking he was successful, he depicted himself as a down-to-earth type whose money hadn't gone to his head and who looked past appearances because he valued a connection over looks. He also claimed that he hoped to find the right woman for a committed long-term relationship. It's true that Giblin looked past appearances, but not for any respectable reason. It was all just a scheme to get money, and unfortunately it was very successful. Over more than 20 years, he swindled hundreds of thousands of dollars out of dozens of women across the US. According to the New York Times, Giblin targeted emotionally vulnerable victims who longed for companionship, including single mums, disabled women, widows, and at least one woman who'd recently lost a child. He kept meticulous records of his targets in notebooks, categorizing them by city and writing down their job and what they were looking for in a romantic partner. During phone calls with victims, Giblin promised to relocate in order to be with them after they wired him some money. Many took the bait despite the fact that he touted himself as wealthy. Giblin first served time for his financial crimes in 2007 after being convicted of wire fraud and was sentenced to 9.5 years in federal prison. An Ohio woman had willingly wired him $450. She initially refused to send more money the next time he asked, but caved when he threatened and intimidated her. Altogether, she sent Giblin 4 payments totaling more than $6,800. She was just one of 50 or more victims Giblin admitted to targeting between 2000 and 2005. And as part of a plea agreement, he admitted to swindling somewhere between $200,000 and $400,000 from women during that time period. The smooth-talking convict returned to federal prison a few years later for another fraud conviction stemming from his romance scams. But he escaped custody in 2020 while being transferred between facilities. During his time on the run, he resumed his swindling activities. Luckily though, he was recaptured in Atlantic City, New Jersey after eluding authorities for 9 months. And as a result, he was hit with a handful of new charges. In an interview with the Daily Beast, Giblin admitted to being a career scammer. He blamed his gambling addiction and expressed remorse, yet described his crimes as thrilling and exciting in the same sentence. In the end, he pleaded guilty to escaping from custody and wire fraud in late 2022 and was sentenced to 5.5 years in prison. 8. Tracy Smith. In April 2023, a confused young man reported an uncomfortable situation with his school principal, which he said had developed over months of daily one-on-one tutoring sessions at an exclusive private school in Coral Springs, Florida. According to the teen, he started visiting 43-year-old Tracy Smith regularly for help with his schoolwork, oftentimes spending the entire school day in her office. During their time together, they discussed their family issues and other aspects of their personal lives that teachers and students don't typically talk about with each other. And at some point, they allegedly began exchanging text messages and talking on Snapchat, where the conversation became intimate. According to an arrest report, the teen initially felt a mother-son type of bond with his principal. Even when things first became physical, it seemed innocent, but it eventually escalated to the point of being inappropriate, according to the student, who wisely distanced himself from Smith. His grades suffered, but he no longer had someone he felt comfortable going to for the help he needed with his studies. The young man then reached out to trusted adults for help, and a police investigation was launched. After concluding that there was enough evidence to pursue a case, authorities charged Smith in connection with the complaint. She remains free on a $25,000 bond, but she's been banned from contacting the student and going near the school while court proceedings commence. 7. Karan Major. Career fraudster Karan Major began swindling people in his hometown of Auburn, New York, when he was in his 20s. He went on to become a serial scammer who conned an unknown number of victims across the United States out of at least a six-figure sum. An acquaintance told the Daily Beast that during the early days of Major's criminal activity, he seemed to target young peers from affluent families in the area where he grew up. He took as much as $10,000 from each victim for what he claimed were legitimate business investments, and in some cases provided them with a financial contract. According to the acquaintance, most people only saw their money back when their parents confronted Major's parents, who reportedly bailed him out and repaid the funds on their son's behalf. It would be a long time, and a lot more damage would be done to people's lives before Major was held accountable for at least some of his crimes. Over the following years, he moved all over the US, including to Los Angeles, New York City, and Tampa. He made money by posing as a businessman on social media and convincing strangers to invest in his non-existent projects. A former classmate who spoke with the Daily Beast described Major as well-spoken and convincing, but his image of being wealthy was a facade, according to the acquaintance, and years of living a lie eventually caught up with him. After being discharged from the US Marines in 2015 for reasons that remain suspiciously unclear to this day, Major began a real estate investment scheme. He recruited investors on social media and at hotel conferences he hosted across the country, promising large returns and selling the image of an upscale lifestyle as part of his strategy to get people on board. According to some individuals who knew him, Major mainly targeted women and young people in general who were attracted to the idea of becoming a wealthy hotshot. Posing as a jet-setting playboy and a savvy young entrepreneur with a seemingly endless stream of disposable income, he served as a walking advertisement for his illegal activities. As more and more people failed to see the high returns that were promised or even their original investment back, they began to call Major out online in a bid to warn others against giving him their money. Many claim that he'd harassed, intimidated, and even threatened them when they asked for their money back. In one complaint filed with the Better Business Bureau, an investor accused Major of duping them out of more than $17,000 and of targeting military members, including active duty soldiers and veterans. In 2022, a federal warrant was issued for Major's arrest following an investigation into criminal complaints filed by two women who claimed that he'd conned them out of a combined $128,000. According to court documents, Major initially deceived the women into giving him money and buying things for him, claiming that he was a CIA agent and couldn't carry out financial transactions in his own name due to national security concerns. One victim told the FBI that Major flew her out to California with the promise of a high-paying job. However, she never got the opportunity to do any of the work in the job description and never received a single paycheck. Meanwhile, she drained her savings and maxed out her credit card, financing Major's lifestyle as he continued to claim that his identity needed to be protected. When they finally cut him off and tried to stop talking to him, he allegedly threatened and harassed them incessantly. The woman had relocated to California at Major's urging, reported receiving hundreds of phone calls a day after she stopped talking to him. It continued for over a year and also affected the victim's family. And at one point, her father received an email demanding that his daughter call Major or his life would be turned upside down. But this was rather mild compared to some of the other death threats he sent to his victims. Major took a similar approach with the second victim, claiming he was a CIA operative and needed money to avoid conducting business with his own identity. He took her to phony meetings where they were supposed to talk with important people, but nobody ever showed up. Much like the first woman, the second woman drained her savings supporting Major's lifestyle. When she went broke, he urged her to ask her parents for money. and when she disentangled from Major, he embarked on a cruel harassment campaign against her. The threats finally stopped when Major was picked up on warrant in Iowa during the summer of 2022. He pleaded guilty to 2 counts of making threats via interstate communication and was sentenced to 21 months in prison, followed by 3 years of post-release supervision. 6. Blind man loses everything. Lured by the promise of opportunity, a blind man traveled from Little Rock, Arkansas to Jackson, Michigan in early 2023 hoping for a fresh start. But he was robbed of all his belongings, including his phone and wallet, and became stranded with nothing but the clothes on his back after spending what little money he had on a hotel room. After going more than 2 days without eating and becoming unable to afford another night at the hotel, the man reached out to law enforcement for help. Jackson County Sheriff Sergeant Tom Freeman responded to the call. When he learned of the man's plight, he offered to purchase a bus ticket for him, as well as some food and water. The out-of-towner was incredibly grateful for Freeman's generosity. And after buying a Greyhound ticket to Lima, Ohio, where the man said he had family who could help him, Freeman spoke with the bus driver to ensure that he'd reach his destination safely. The driver, who happened to be a retired police officer, reassured Freeman that he'd look after him. To Freeman, it was no big deal to help someone in need. In fact, he didn't even mention it to his colleagues. But when Sergeant Brian Hunlocker noticed the ticket receipt pulled up on a computer at the station, he was curious. So he asked the fellow sergeant about the ticket, and Freeman explained the situation. This came as no surprise to members of the police department though. As it turned out, it was just one of several times Freeman had paid out of his own pocket to ensure that a vulnerable civilian's basic needs were met. He told local station WILX that while it may not be a specific requirement of his job, he loves his community and believes in doing what he can to help fellow humans in need. 5. Madison Brooks. 19-year-old Louisiana State University student Madison Brooks was served alcohol at a bar in Baton Rouge one evening in January 2023, despite her being underage. Surveillance footage would later show her stumbling, falling, and struggling to stand up in what appeared to be a visibly intoxicated state. Sometime between 1 and 2 a.m., the young woman was seen leaving the bar with 4 men she'd met that evening. Just an hour or 2 later, Madison was fatally struck by a car. She'd been left alone in the middle of a road, and her blood alcohol content was nearly 4 times the legal limit. What at first seemed like an unfortunate tragedy was soon labeled a crime by the East Baton Rouge Sheriff's Office, who accused 4 suspects of assaulting Madison in a vehicle and dumping her onto the pavement like trash. 18-year-old Kaysen Carver, 18-year-old Kayvon DeAndre Washington, 28-year-old Everett Lee, and an unnamed 4th suspect now face various charges in connection with the incident. Under the definition of the crime that 2 of the men are accused of, a victim is considered too incapacitated by drugs or alcohol to consent to physical relations, and the perpetrator is aware of the victim's inability to consent. The 2 other men were charged with being present during the assault, but not directly participating in it, and failing to take action in an attempt to stop it from happening. But there are multiple sides to every story, and all 4 suspects remain innocent until proven guilty in the eyes of the law. And while the case has understandably generated widespread outrage, the American justice system is designed to give every defendant a fair shake, no matter how despicable their alleged crime may be. The case will most likely center around a few main arguments: whether Madison was capable of consenting, and whether she exited the vehicle in a seemingly coherent state or was dumped on the road while she was obviously incapacitated. 4. Dennis Carey. When an elderly retired bus driver from Limerick, Ireland, offered to buy him ice cream one day in 2019, an intellectually disabled man in his 30s thought he'd made a new friend. Over the next month, however, 82-year-old Dennis Carey began violating the young man, and it escalated over subsequent meetings. Police launched an investigation after the victim told his neighbor about the situation and said that something didn't feel right about his friendship with Carey. The neighbor went to the victim's family, who then contacted law enforcement. During questioning, Carey acknowledged that he was aware of the victim's learning disability. He also admitted to his inappropriate behavior and pleaded guilty to assault. The conviction came on the heels of a similarly disturbing case that Carey had pleaded guilty to in 2020. Until then, he had no criminal record. Following his arrests, he and his wife separated, and he became estranged from his family. Throughout his more recent case, Carey told the court that he'd started receiving counseling for his issues. The judge then imposed an 18-month suspended sentence. In an impact statement, the victim said he was glad Carey pleaded guilty, which spared him from having to testify at trial. He described feeling too scared to speak up and suffering from flashbacks of the abuse, and thanked the police and other people who helped him come forward and listened without judging. 3. Brian Lynch. A sheriff's deputy from Onondaga County, New York, is facing career-threatening criminal charges after a woman filed a complaint accusing him of taking advantage of her when she was in a distressed state. It all started in March of 2023, when the woman called the police to report that her ex-boyfriend had stolen her car during an argument. When the authorities arrived, she got the impression that one of the responding deputies, Brian Lynch, was trying to flirt with her. According to the complaint, Lynch tracked the woman down on social media and messaged her during the early morning hours. She said they exchanged some text messages and met up to talk for about 20 minutes outside a local dairy. They didn't communicate again until about a week and a half later, when Lynch responded to a call at a local bar about a dispute between the woman and her ex. In an affidavit, Lynch said that he drove the woman home because she was too drunk to drive. Both parties later admitted to kissing, but the woman claimed that Lynch was trying to go further than she wanted and that he sat in her driveway for about an hour before finally leaving. She accused him of pressuring her to press charges against her ex and showing up at her house with documents he wanted her to sign. According to the alleged victim, though, the details in the statements were inaccurate and she didn't want to press charges. However, she felt pressured, so she signed the complaint. By then, Lynch had allegedly gotten extremely pushy, nagging her on multiple occasions to let him come over. One night while she was out, her doorbell camera alerted her to footage of what appeared to be Lynch trying to break into her house after she told him she wouldn't be home. Lynch apologized for damaging the front door while trying to break in with a knife and said that he was only planning to wait for her until she got home so they could hang out. Because Lynch was a cop, the woman was scared of the potential repercussions she might face for reporting him. She had a friend report the break-in, but ultimately decided to go to Lynch's superiors herself and express her concerns. Lynch now faces charges of criminal mischief and official misconduct, and is on unpaid leave pending the outcome of the case. 2. Peaches Stego. A Holocaust survivor in his 80s went online looking for love in 2017 and met a 36-year-old Florida woman named Peaches Stego, who didn't wait long before asking to borrow money she most likely had no intention of repaying. Stego told the victim that she'd won a lawsuit settlement but needed to pay her lawyer before the funds would be released. She continued to spin tall tales over the next 4.5 years as she drained the senior citizen of his life savings. At one point, the romance fraudster created a phony email address and presented the victim with fake TD Bank invoices to make the scam look legitimate. Altogether, Stego swindled the victim out of more than $2.8 million, which came in the form of 62 personal checks that were deposited into her bank accounts. She then spent the ill-gotten funds on a Corvette, a boat, Rolex watches and other designer duds, lavish vacations, and a house in a gated community. Meanwhile, the victim went flat broke and lost his apartment. Federal authorities eventually caught up with Stego, who pleaded guilty to one count of wire fraud. She was ordered to pay $2.8 million in restitution and to forfeit more than 100 luxury items she bought with the victim's money. Stego now faces up to 20 years in prison and is scheduled to be sentenced in July of 2023. 1. Sarat Rangsit. In what's been described as one of Thailand's worst ever suspected serial killer cases, a pregnant woman named Sarat Rangsit allegedly poisoned as many as 15 people with cyanide after swindling them out of large amounts of money. According to authorities, the married mother-to-be first fell under their radar in April 2023 after her friend mysteriously collapsed and died during an outing together. They have evidence suggesting that she may have claimed her first victim in 2020, but they believe she may have killed before then. Investigators claim that Sarat had a lot of debt and financial problems. She borrowed money from friends and acquaintances, and when they started pushing for repayment, she began murdering them. Sarat is accused of persuading her unsuspecting lenders to take one of her herb capsules, which in reality was a cyanide tablet, and after killing them she stole their valuables. For now, she faces 14 counts of premeditated murder. In addition to the victims who died, a 15th victim survived being poisoned. Police believe Sarat may have killed others that they don't know about and are hoping anyone with information comes forward. During the investigation, law enforcement questioned Sarat's ex-husband, a high-ranking policeman named Vitun Rangsit. The couple had recently divorced but were still living together at the time of her arrest, and so Vitun was charged with fraud and embezzlement in connection with the killings. If you worked for a celebrity who put the moves on you behind their partner's back, would you go forward and tell the media, or would you keep it a secret? And what would be your reason for the choice? Let us know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye.